How are you, fellas?
It's him.
The anomaly.
Do we proceed?
Yes, he is still
Only human.
In the beginning of basketball, there were only a few players of such elite skill. There was nothing you could do. Bill Russell was one of these ball gods, the catalyst to the NBA's most dominant franchise. What he does in his 13-year career, no player in the history of basketball would ever accomplish again. The greatest defender basketball's ever seen. He was the first truly athletic big man, with a vertical so mean he could block your shot easily, and was the king of rebounds. This week's video is about Bill Russell. Born in Louisiana, 30 years before the Civil Rights Act of 1964, his father taught him from birth to stand up for himself. At the height of racism supported by law in America, Louisiana was a dangerous place for African Americans, and one night his grandfather held off the Klan with a shotgun. So they moved to Oakland, California in 1943. It was a safer place for the family, although life would stay hard on Bill Russell. His mother would develop kidney issues and died at 32 years old. Bill had been through a lot in life, and he developed an intense, very serious mentality that would stay with him for life. As Bill got older, he also got a lot taller. He was 6'2" in middle school, and the high school coach gave him a spot on the JV team. He even sponsored him through summers on club teams. His senior year at McClymonds High School, he played so well, and a loan from San Francisco convinced the university to offer him a scholarship, and he was officially a Don, and the tallest player in D1 at 6'9". His first varsity game, they played Cal Berkeley, who had an All-American big man, and everyone thought he'd wax Russell, but it was Russell who would do the waxing, blocking the big man's first 5 shots. His coach was flabbergasted. He had never seen a blocked shot before, telling Russ he can't play defense like that. Remember, we're talking early days of basketball. The sport was just becoming mainstream, and there hadn't been a lot of adapting in the game because we were still figuring out how to play. For Russell, there was only one way to play: win at all costs. He led the Dons to a record 55 straight wins and 2 NCAA championships. Bill Russell was the single greatest defender basketball had ever seen. He was the king of block shots in an era that didn't even recognize him as stats, but he would quickly show everyone just how important defense was to winning. Teammates say Russell would have averaged 10 blocks a game, not to mention his 20 points and 20 rebounds every game. After he was done winning in college, he would go to the Olympics and win some more, grabbing gold after graduation. Russell decided to go pro after playing above even an NBA level in college. The team set to draft Russell was the St. Louis Hawks. It was 1956. St. Louis was incredibly racist at the time. It was 8 years before the Civil Rights Act, and racial tension in the country was pretty high. And Hawks executives, along with Bill Russell, agreed that if the team drafted him, the city would turn on the team. Russell said he never would have played in the NBA if St. Louis were to draft him, and Boston Celtics coach Red Auerbach wasn't letting that happen. The Celtics were the first to draft an African American player 6 years earlier. They were also the first team to play 5 African Americans on a team. Auerbach traded up to number 2 in the draft with the Hawks to land what his team had needed to reach the next level. The Celtics already had the best passer in the league at the time, Bob Cousy. They had just gone 36-36, third in the East, and lost the Eastern Conference Finals to the Syracuse Nationals. Red Auerbach said that he doesn't know what Bill Russell does. He'd never seen anything like it. Russell added 14 points per game his rookie year and 20 rebounds a game, and defensively he was cooking everybody. Not to mention Russell and Cousy decided to create the outlet pass, scoring at will with the first fast break in the history of basketball. Russell would tell everyone to run to the other end of the court as soon as their opponent shot the ball, because Russell was almost always coming down with the board. Russell would lead his team as a rookie to the championship against the incredibly racist city of St. Louis. It took 7 games, but Bill Russell and the Boston Celtics had won their first title. Although Russell was the best thing that happened to Boston basketball in its history, the times were not kind to him. The city of Boston didn't like him. The most successful team in basketball couldn't sell out their home crowd. When the team put out surveys to see what they could improve upon, more than 50% of the people said the team was too black. Bill Russell resented the city of Boston for this. He said he plays for the Celtics, not for Boston. In 1959, Russell had just finished sweeping the Minneapolis Lakers. He appeared in the last 3 finals, only losing 1 to St. Louis in 1958. Russell was fed up with America's racial tension, so he went to Africa in the offseason to reconnect with his roots. Returning enlightened and always serious, he would go on a rampage, winning 8 titles in a row. But it was still the 60s, and racial tension would only get worse. In 1963, the NAACP's first field secretary, Medgar Evers, was shot and killed in Mississippi. Russell went to the funeral and even held a basketball program in Jackson to try and bring people together. One day, the Celtics went to Marion, Indiana to be presented with the key to the city. Once the ceremony was over, the team went to a restaurant nearby, only to be turned away by the managers, whose only dumbass reason was racism. So Bill went to the mayor's house and told him what he could do with his key. Things were so bad back then that Boston sports writers voted for a white player on a different team over Bill Russell as MVP of the All-Star Game, a trophy which meant the most to Bill, who promised his father he'd win it years earlier. Russell would start looking for houses in Reading, Massachusetts, to show the city African Americans could live with white people in peace, but he was met with violence. The neighborhood started petitioning against him moving in, and when he did, people would often break in and vandalize it, shit in his bed, doing what they could to try to get Russell to leave. He went to the police, but they wouldn't help, so he took matters into his own hands. He applied for a gun license, and the racists stopped vandalizing his family's house. In 1964, he already had 5 rings, and the NBA's All-Star Game was coming up. A huge opportunity for the whole country to watch the very best of basketball. The NBA had the first TV contract to broadcast the game on ABC, but Bill was going to take care of his colleagues first, as the league was known to heavily take advantage of players back then. He and several other stars in the league had plans to argue for player rights before the game, but a snowstorm kept the NBA refs from meeting with them, so they tried to put the meeting off till next year. That wasn't good enough for the greatest winner of all time, as he and the other players planned to strike and not play in the All-Star Game, making the league look bad to ABC. The owners had to appease the players or lose the opportunity to grow the league's audience, so the league decided to recognize the players' union at the end of the season, the first professional sports union in the major leagues. In 1966, Red Auerbach took a step back from coaching and became the Celtics' general manager. He had to hire someone to succeed him, and who else than the greatest winner of all time, Bill Russell. He became the first African-American coach in the major leagues in 1966 and won 2 titles in his 3-player coaching years. The night before Game 7 of the NBA Finals against the Lakers, Russ had been at a bar when a fight broke out. Russ tried to break it up, but in doing so, he accidentally got stabbed. Luckily, Bill Russell was an absolute psychopath when it came to winning. He showed up with a stab wound, played the whole game, and won the title. In his entire career, Russell faced elimination 30 times. In those 30 games, he won 28 of them and only lost 2. He had the Michael Jordan or Kobe mentality before we knew what it was. When I was researching this video, I saw a quote about the media and the way they cover sports that I feel is still relevant to this day. Bill Russell says, "Sport is a mixture of art and war. If it was all art, there'd be no competition and it'd be in a museum. And if it was all war, it wouldn't have any beauty or attraction. The way sports is covered, it's not a mixture of art and war. It's just bums and heroes." And that bums and heroes mentality of the media would be how they framed basketball's biggest rivalry at the time. If you haven't heard of Wilt Chamberlain,
you better recognize
he and Bill Russell always went at it on the court. He had the greatest offensive player of all time against the greatest defender the game had ever seen. When Wilt and Russ first played, Chamberlain waxed him, but that may have been his greatest mistake, as Bill would use that as fire to beating Wilt's ass for years to come. In the 8 playoff series against Wilt, Russell went 7-1. Bill's overall record against him was 86-57. Wilt was taller and bigger, but Russell had that psychopathic winner's mentality, unmatched in sports at the time. The media liked to pit the greats against each other to sell newspapers and magazines, but off the court, like Jordan and Magic, Wilt and Russ were friends. They put their friendship aside in 1969 though, as the Lakers and Celtics once again go to Game 7 in the NBA Finals. Russell had a plan. He and Cousy would fast break the Lakers to death, which worked great. The Celtics were up 17 going into the 4th quarter, but with about 5 minutes left, Wilt tweaked his knee and came out of the game to try and get the pain to chill out. When his knee calmed down, he was ready to go back in, but Coach Butch Van Bredikoff, I don't know how you say that, sorry bro, didn't like Wilt and wanted to win the championship without him in the game. But they would again lose to the Celtics, making their championship record in the 1960s 0-7 against Boston. And after the game, Russell called Wilt a faker, saying he shouldn't have gone out in the last game of the season. He and Wilt wouldn't talk again for a few years. Chamberlain took offense to what he said, but Bill would eventually apologize, and they were friends again after that. Winning his last championship in 1969 was also the first time the NBA gave out a Finals MVP trophy. It was given to Bill Russell, and even named after him. Deservedly so, having been the greatest winner in all of sports. I think the most tragic thing about basketball's greatest defender is that blocks were never tracked in his career. We'll never know how truly laughable his blocking numbers were. All we have are ancient stories of the greatest defensive ball god this game's ever seen. In 1975, he would be inducted into the Hall of Fame, but he protested it, saying several African American players should have been inducted before him. He always stood up for what was right. When Boston retired his jersey number, the crowd gave him a standing ovation, but he didn't acknowledge them after all the city had put him throughout his career. The city didn't like that at the time, but later he would come back for another ceremony where he would acknowledge the crowd, and then everybody was cool. After his playing career, he did some commentary and then coached the Supersonics, but was irritated with the unserious approach players had toward the game he'd given his life to. Bill Russell retired in 1969 at 35 years old. He won 11 titles, averaged 15 and 22 rebounds a game, won 5 MVPs in his career. He was a 12-time All-Star, 4-time rebounding champ, 11 times made All-NBA, and one of the greatest athletes the human race has ever seen. July 31st, 2022, he died. He was 88 years old. Rest in peace to the greatest defender basketball's ever seen, Bill Russell.